Today is the beginner's masterclass on handsaws. Let's get into it. Did you know a handsaw actually has a square on it? Let me show you this. If you have a board and you need a straight line across, there's a really easy answer. This edge is a perfect 90. Now you have a 90 on it. But let's say that you need a 45. If you're doing some miters, you need a nice 45. So this edge is almost always on every saw going to be a 45. So you have a perfect 90 and you have a perfect 45. Your saw has that for a reason. It's so that you could just draw it out and cut your part and you don't need to go hunt down a square. Now this type of saw, this is just a standard saw. This is going to do a very good job at cutting wood very quickly, but not very precisely. Now what makes this a great saw for cutting wood is it has very large teeth. These teeth go in the same direction so that as you cut, you are cutting both forward and backwards. So every time you push, you're cutting, and every time you pull, you're cutting. That makes it so that this can cut very, very quickly, but for some things, it's not very accurate then, because as you're cutting both directions, you're just ripping wood away. You don't have very much control over your cut. That's great for framing, or if you just have some basic stuff that you need, but it's not great for carpentry if you're getting into furniture, let's say. But that is how you use a standard saw. Now, if you want to get a different type of cut, a coping saw has a very different purpose, something that this guy could never hope to accomplish. Now, if you were ever going to cut through a 2x4, you wouldn't want to use this because it cuts super slowly because super thin teeth. Those teeth are very tiny. It's a fine-tooth blade because it's meant for making very precise, clean cuts. Now, the beauty of a coping saw is that if you want, you take and you would squeeze the saw together and your blade can come out. So the blade can be removed. Now, this is what a coping saw was designed for. We have two holes here and we want to put a slot in between them. You take and you remove the blade, put the blade down through the opening, and then reinstall the blade on the saw, just like that. So now our blade is trapped inside this hole. But then what we can do, and just like that, we cut out a piece, and we have a slot. And then when you're done, you would simply take your saw once again, compress it so that the blade disconnects, and reconnect it so you have your entire saw. Now another thing that is really good for is cutting curves if you want to, because it's such a thin blade, as you go you're able to twist it. So you can cut holes and stuff, you can cut curves and stuff. It's a very diverse use saw, but it is meant for fine cutting. And another thing that we may notice, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, all the teeth go in one direction. So what that means is, in this case, all the teeth are angled down and then they have the edge. So as I am pulling this, I'm cutting, but as I push it, I'm not cutting. Now, you may want to go in different directions for different reasons. You get finer control if you are pulling while you cut, but you can remove more material while you're pushing just because of the way your muscles work. As you push, you get more force than when you're pulling. So if you're going for a very precise cut, you're going to want to be pulling as you cut. But if you are trying to just remove the material like I was doing with that slot, then it doesn't matter, you can push or pull. But that is something to pay attention to. If your blade is only cutting one way, keep that in mind as you cut. And our final type of saw is a hacksaw. Though they may look fairly similar, with this being a fine-tooth blade and also being a single direction cut, it is not meant for wood. And you would have a very hard time cutting wood because the teeth on this guy are even smaller, believe it or not, than the teeth on this guy. Now what this is meant for is cutting metal. Just like that. That is what that saw is meant for. And just like the coping saw, this is a single direction cut. So as you are pushing, as we were saying earlier, you get more force in a push rather than in a pull. So we have it set up so that as you push through the metal, it's cutting, and as you pull, it's just gliding back. That's a lot easier. It makes things a lot faster for you because you get a lot more force cutting when you're pushing. Now, something to account for with all of these blades is if you are cutting and you twist, even a little bit, if you just twist that saw while you're cutting, it will bind, especially in thicker material. The hacksaw is notorious for it. A rip saw is really difficult. If you're cutting through a 2x4 and you twist, it'll bind up and you're not gonna get any movement. So, very important to practice keeping that thing perfectly straight up and down as you cut. Because as you cut, you're gonna wanna be kind of wobbling all over the place. If you can manage to keep that saw perfectly straight up and down, you'll get a super easy cut every single time. And something else to note is the width of your blade. While a hacksaw is a very thin blade, it removes very little material, a rip saw is gonna be a much thicker blade. So something to account for when cutting is your kerf, which is the width of the cut that you produce. So you have your spine, which is gonna be pretty thin. Then you have your teeth, which are usually slightly wider to reduce friction on the spine. But then any amount of wobble that the blade has from vibrations or from you twisting it just a hair is gonna change the width. So your kerf is the actual width of the cut, not the width of your saw. And it will always be slightly wider than your saw. Not by much, but just a little bit. So you always want to account for your kerf. This one is about a 16th of an inch kerf. It's not a very thick blade, very thin teeth. It's not carbide tipped or anything, so there's no extra material. It's just slightly wider. So this will be about a 16th kerf. Whereas a hacksaw is gonna be about a 32nd of an inch. Maybe a little bit more, but it'll be right around there depending on what blade you buy. So when cutting material, always account for your kerf, because if you do not account for that, your widths will be all off. But I hope you guys learned something today. That is how you use hand saws. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.